if you are listening to this, there is a part of you that already knows. Something inside has been breaking for years. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like a woman who has held the world together for too long. This is the story of what happens when your light refuses to die and decides to rise instead. The quiet collapse. Teamwork resembles willingness. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. There are moments in a woman's life that arrive without announcing themselves. No catastrophe, no slammed doors, no dramatic ending. Smith, a slow, almost imperceptible shifting inside her chest, silence that tells her something is breaking, but not in the way she once feared. If you are listening to this, perhaps you know that feeling. Missions. It never arrives in a storm. Smith. It comes in the quiet. Sometimes it appears on a Tuesday night, when the house has finally fallen into silence, and the only sound you hear is the soft ticking of a clock, polished, here where you've spent years trying to hold everyone together. Missions. You sit at the edge of your bed, the light from your phone fading against your palm, and it hits you. Miss, not the pain of what someone did, but the pain of everything you've carried, quietly, faithfully, invisibly. The world doesn't see this moment. No one does. Fishing, not even the people who claim to love you. Because the collapse of a woman like you is almost always invisible. It happens inside the spaces where you keep your composure, inside the smile you put on for your children, inside the conversations where you say, "I'm okay," because the truth feels too heavy to offer, inside the responsibilities you never asked for, jonged to shoulder anyway. And the strange thing is, nothing dramatic happens when the collapse begins. Smith, you still show up, pressing breakfast. You still answer messages. You still laugh when someone needs you to laugh. Missions. But something in you begins to loosen. The knot you tied around your own truth. The mask you've worn for years. The performance of being fine. There is a day, you may remember it, shipping when you wake up and the heaviness is no longer just heaviness. It is a language, missions, turbulence coming from the deepest part of you. You look around your life, the kitchen you've cleaned more times than you can count, the relationship where you've spoken in whispers, the friendships where you've always been the listener, the healer, the safe one, and you suddenly feel the weight of all the places where you disappeared yourself, medicine to make everything else work. It is not despair. It is recognition. A soft internal voice, the one you silenced for decades, finally speaks. I cannot keep living this way. And you don't cry. Not immediately. Not even in the way you used to. You just feel tired. Not physically, not from lack of sleep, but from years of being emotionally awake for other people while sleepwalking through your own needs. Theftities becomes a kind of clarity. Missions, you start noticing everything you once talked yourself out of noticing. How someone's love depends on your silence. How you are praised for what you give, rather than who you are. How you became the emotional spine of relationships that should have had two. And yet, willingness, you don't get angry. You just feel. You simply see. Jung once wrote that consciousness begins with suffering, and there is something hauntingly accurate about that. Because the first stage of awakening shields is not rage, not empowerment, not boundaries. Bills, the kind that sits quietly in your chest, slim whispers truths you're not ready to hear. Truths like, yeah, have loved harder than you were loved. You gave more than anyone ever realized. You forgave so much that forgiveness became your identity. You stayed long after your heart knew it was time to go. You learned to carry other people's chaos so they would not abandon you. And somewhere along the way, you lost the map back to yourself. The quiet collapse is the moment your soul hands that map back to you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't warn. It doesn't bargain. It simply says, it's time. Time to stop performing the role of the strong one. Time to stop shrinking your truth so others can stay comfortable. Time to stop carrying emotions that were never yours to carry. Time to stop confusing being needed with being valued. And here is the most painful part. You realize how long you have ignored your own instincts. How many times your body warned you, but you smoothed over the discomfort. How often your intuition whispered, onions would told yourself you were overthinking. You know that moment when a woman whispers, I'm tired, satisfied, and the whole room goes quiet because everyone can feel she is not talking about sleep. Presumption, that is what the quiet collapse feels like. A soft, devastating truth. Buffering, the way you've been living, is too small for who you are becoming. But before you grow, before you reclaim, Jiang, before you rise, the collapse must happen. Not to destroy you, stiffness, but to hollow out the spaces where you have been living too little. You might find yourself pulling away from people without meaning to. A conversation that once felt normal now feels draining. A relationship you once fought for now feels strangely distant. Tension's release comment lingers longer than it should. A moment of disrespect lands differently. Discharged because it's new, miscellaneous, but because you finally have the clarity to feel it fully. This is the moment the persona, propulsion of the helper, the caretaker, the good woman, begins to crack. And the cracking is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not chaotic. It sounds like a quiet thought in a quiet room. What about me? The woman who always carried others, dismissing to wonder what it would feel like if someone carried her. The woman who always swallowed her hurt begins to wonder how long she has been disappearing. The woman who spent years being understanding begins to question why no one ever tried to understand her. And that question, that simple, trembling question, is your rebirth. Because the collapse doesn't end you, it reveals you. It shows you the places where your loyalty became self-abandonment. It shows you the relationships where your silence was mistaken for resilience. It shows you the history you've rewritten to protect people who never protected you. It shows you the way you have lived, half alive, waiting for someone to notice what you needed, without ever believing you were allowed to ask. And then something unexpected happens. Your anger awakens, meshes, setbacks, not the fiery, destructive kind, pensions, not the kind that breaks things, not the kind that lashes out, but the quiet, sacred anger affirmed of a woman who has finally stopped lying to herself. Sentenced, it is the anger of recognition. Pensions, the anger of awakening. The anger of seeing your life clearly for the first time, issues, and realizing how much of yourself you had to bury just to make things work. Siblings, this anger doesn't ask you to burn your life down. It asks you to step back into it with your eyes open. Because the quiet collapse is not a fall, sentencing, but is a descent. Blindness, because your own depths. Back into the woman you left behind. Prescience, back into the intuition you muted. It is the beginning of a conversation with your soul that you have avoided for years. A conversation that sounds like, I miss myself. I don't want to live like this anymore. I deserve a life where I can breathe. I deserve love that doesn't require my disappearance. And even if nothing changes on the outside, everything changes on the inside. You start treating your own pain like it matters. You start hearing your own voice without silencing it. You start noticing where you tense, where you ache, where you tremble. You start remembering the woman you were before life taught you to make yourself small. This is the quiet collapse, the soft unraveling, the sacred undoing, the silent turning point. And though no one else may see it, you can feel it in your breath, in your chest, in the way your soul presses gently against the life you've been living and whispers, this is not who you are anymore. The collapse is not your ending. It is your threshold. And in part 2, the mirror breaks. You will meet the woman who has been waiting for you on the other side of all that silence. The mirror breaks. There comes a moment in every woman's life, links she does not plan, does not choose, does not even recognize at first, when the mirror she has been gazing into for years suddenly cracks. Not the mirror in her bathroom, not the one in her bedroom, but the invisible mirror inside her heart, unfinished, where she learned to see herself through the eyes of others. Greg, maybe decades, you have shaped your reflection according to what the world needed from you. A wife who keeps the peace, a mother who never breaks, a colleague who absorbs everyone's stress without complaint, a daughter who never asks for too much, a friend who listens endlessly, but cannot remember the last time someone asked, "Are you okay?" You constructed a version of yourself. Trang made it easier for everyone to love you, except you. And then, one day, sending a glimpse of yourself, not through their gaze, but through your own, and the mirror breaks. It doesn't shatter violently. Smith cracks gently, missions, almost mercifully. Smith, as if the universe is whispering, "Here, look at yourself truthfully now. Not as you were expected to be, but as you actually are." And the truth, when it finally rises, does not come in words. It comes in a feeling, stitial but undeniable, knowing that the woman you've been performing is not the woman living inside you. There are often a specific moment, silk, ordinary, forgettable to anyone but you, when this happens. Maybe you're folding laundry and your hands pause mid-air. Maybe you're sitting in your car, engine off, unable to open the door. Maybe someone calls your name. Your own name feels foreign, like it belongs to someone else. Or maybe it happens in the quiet way most awakenings do. You look at a photo of yourself, traverse and you suddenly see the exhaustion in your smile, a tiredness you thought you hid so well. The mirror breaks not because of trauma, but because of truth. And truth is a light that doesn't ask permission. The strange thing is, you don't feel powerful in this moment. You feel exposed. Because when the mirror cracks, you begin to see all the ways you've abandoned yourself so quietly, teammates that no one noticed, not even you. You see the times you swallowed your intuition because someone told you that you were dramatic. You see the moments you minimized your needs because someone else's comfort mattered more. You see the countless nights you lay awake, wondering why love felt like labor, mantras, why caring felt like erosion, why you kept giving in ways, millions that turned you hollow. And the hardest part to admit is this: you always knew. A part of you always knew. But you ready to see it? You are not ready to disappoint the people who depended on your silence. Yet, when the mirror breaks, there is no returning to blindness. Awakening is not loud. Pensions, it is irreversible. There a peculiar clarity that awakens inside a woman who has finally begun to see herself. It is not confidence. Not yet. It is something more quieter, more tender, sentencing, like the first flicker of the truth in the deep forest, triumph just before dawn. You begin asking questions you never allowed yourself to ask. Well, was I the only one who held everything together? Why did I call it love when it felt so much like loneliness? Why did I believe I had to earn what should have been freely given? Why did I silence myself in rooms where everyone else spoke freely? Why did I stay where my soul kept shrinking? These questions don't ask for answers. They ask for honesty. Mission and honesty is the beginning of liberation. It is also the beginning of grief. Grief is always the shadow of awakening. Because when the mirror breaks, you don't just see the truth of your life. You see the years, ignoring it. You grieve the version of you who tolerated too much. You grieve the friendships you outgrew, battleground long before you left. You grieve the marriage you tried to save alone. You grieve the woman you were forced to become in order to be loved halfway. And this grief, this sacred, feminine grief, is not weakness. It is cleansing. It is the washing away of old illusions, old promises, old patterns, pensions, old selves. Jung wrote that when the psyche is ready to grow, the old self must fall apart. This is that falling apart. Fill of the dramatic kind, but the quiet unraveling of every lie you ever told yourself in order to keep a life that was slowly breaking you. Some moment as a strange distance, as if they are watching their own life from a few steps back, as if their soul has moved slightly out of place so it can get a clearer view. You still love the people you love. You still show up in all your roles. You still keep your promises. But something inside you is shifting. Your eyes open differently. You begin to notice not just what people say, but what they do not say. You feel the way someone's energy changes in your presence. You sense the unspoken expectations underneath their requests. You detect the imbalance in your relationships, fencing without needing anyone to explain it. This is what Jung called the return of the shadow. The the part of you that knew the truth all along, but learned to stay quiet to survive. Then, breaking of the mirror is the moment that shadow begins to speak. Not angrily, not destructively, but truthfully. It says, "This is who they are. This is who you've become. This is what your heart has been whispering for years. This is what your intuition tried to tell you. This is the path you must no longer follow." And the world feels both sharper and softer at once. Sharper because you can see clearly. Sickness because clarity is a kind of mercy. Pledged, one of the most terrifying parts of this stage is realizing how much of your life was built on what others needed you to be. A caretaker, dismissing, peacekeeper, a forgiver, a woman who absorbs instead of asks, who understands instead of expresses, emissions, who fixes instead of receives, who apologizes for feeling too deeply in a world that feels too little. And then you realize something else. You never actually chose those roles. They were handed to you, expected of you, rewarded when you complied, punished when you resisted. Sentencing. You contorted yourself so expertly, sentencing that even you began to believe the mask was your face. Permissible. But the mirror breaks. Sentencing. And suddenly, fishing. You are looking into your real face again. Stiffness. The one you had forgotten. Real woman who once existed before survival demanded her disappearance. Simmons. The woman inside the woman. Shimmer. She has been waiting for you. The breaking of the mirror is often followed by a silence that feels different, pollution from any silence you've known. It is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. It is not loneliness. It is the absence of noise, tightening that once drowned out your truth. It is not the silence of isolation. It is the silence of awakening. Bribement between who you were and who you are becoming. And in that silence, hearing yourself again. You hear your exhaustion. You hear your longing. You hear your anger. Bishops, not as rage, myth, but as boundary. Simmons, you hear your intuition, the one that always whispered, plumbing, but was always ignored. You hear the faint echo of a promise, staffing you once made to yourself and forgot. I will not abandon you again. That promise is the beginning of your power. There is a strange kind of courage staffing inside a woman after the mirror breaks. Not the loud courage that marches forward, not the dramatic courage that demands change, but a quiet, steady courage. The courage to finally tell the truth to herself. You begin walking differently, thinking differently, feeling differently. You respond to messages with a little more honesty. You say no, bridges with a little less guilt. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who benefited from your lack of them. You begin protecting your peace, partition sexism. You once protected everyone else. You don't try to fix people anymore. You don't try to convince anyone to change. You don't beg for effort. You don't plead to be understood. Pensions. You don't rush to fill the silence. You don't shrink to maintain harmony. Kneel is the quiet, Jungian truth. The woman who sees herself cannot go back to being unseen. And perhaps the most beautiful, slay painful, part of this stage is recognizing that the mirror didn't break misuse because you failed. Break because it broke, because you finally grew too large for the reflection that once confined you. The woman you were pretending to be could no longer contain the woman you are becoming. And so, the mirror, that old identity, that old story, ancients of you, old version of you, had to shatter, not as punishment, but as liberation. Because no woman can step into her true life while trapped inside a false reflection. The mirror breaks. Misinformation. You are finally free to meet yourself, to see the truth of your heart, to acknowledge the wounds you minimized, to honor the depth you once apologized for, to reclaim the intuition, fishing that tried to save you over and over and over again. And from this moment forward, there is no returning to who you were. There is only becoming honest, becoming whole, becoming clear, becoming the woman Wilson Soul has been waiting for. In part 3, The Dark Night of the Helper, we will enter the most tender, reshape, found, permissible, and most transformative stage of your awakening, where everything you once did to survive, sessions begins to fall away, a night every empath must walk through, but no longer alone. The Dark Night of the Helper. Wearish words require. There is a night every deeply feeling woman eventually enters, a night that doesn't look any different from the ones before it. The same lamp glowing softly on the bedside table, the same familiar ceiling above you, the same sheets gathered around your legs. Cleanliness, but something is different. Not outselfish, inside. It is the night when exhaustion stops being something you feel and becomes something you are. Battlefield staring at the ceiling, your thoughts moving slowly, heavy like wet fabric. And for the first time in a very long time, you cannot outrun the truth. Sentenced, you cannot negotiate with it. You cannot soften it. You cannot disguise it as duty, as loyalty, as love. Theft is simple, painful, and sharp. I cannot carry this anymore. This sentence arrives like a visitor you didn't invite. Missiles but knew somehow would come. It doesn't shout. It doesn't insist. Imprison. It just sits with you in the dark quiet and refuses to leave. This is the beginning of the dark night of the helper. Fishing, the night a woman realizes that being strong has cost her pieces of herself, missions she never learned to mourn. It is in this night, slashing, that you start to feel the weight of all the ways you abandoned your own needs under the banner of being good, giving, supportive, understanding. It is a strange kind of heaviness, not sadness exactly, permission exactly, but a mixture of both, pledged around the soft ache of recognition. You remember the nights you stayed awake, comforting someone who never once asked if you were sleeping well. You remember the conversations where you listened so deeply your chest hurt, and then were left alone with the weight of everything you absorbed. You remember the birthday you cooked for everyone, while no one noticed your trembling hands. You remember the times you were hurting, assassin but silenced yourself, because someone else's crisis felt more urgent. You remember how good it felt to make others feel safe, and how lonely it felt that no one ever returned the gesture. And as these memories rise, you don't feel anger. You feel something deeper, the kind of sadness that has lived in your ribcage, siblings for so long, it has built a home there. This sadness whispers, pensions, you were a refuge for everyone but yourself. Who love deeply often learn early that their value comes from being useful, from their ability to soothe, to fix, to stabilize. Maybe you learned it from a parent whose moods you tiptoed around. Maybe from a partner who mistook your compassion for endurance. Maybe from a culture sentencing that praises women for disappearing gracefully, who wherever you learned it, the lesson sank deep. If I can help, I will be loved. If I can carry, I will belong. But the dark night of the helper is the moment your soul refuses to carry that lie any longer. It is the moment your body softens into the bed, your breath slows, and something in you says, I am tired of earning a place that should have been mine. This night is not about anyone else. It is about the realization, have been living without yourself for so long, press what it felt like to be held. Even this night also brings fear, a soft, trembling fear that lives in the space between your breaths. Because if you stop helping, who will you be? If you stop holding everything together, bribe will fall apart. If you stop rescuing people, who will remain? Who will stay when you are no longer easy, no longer agreeable, no longer endlessly available? This is the most honest fear of all. What if no one stays when I stop sacrificing myself? Night forces you to sit with that question, not to answer it, but to feel the depth of it inside your bones. In this stillness, another truth rises. If someone only stays because I disappear, they were never truly with me. It is a brutal truth, but it is also a freeing one. There is a point, liberation, almost sacred turning, where the helper in you begins to understand something the world never taught her. Not every burden is yours to carry. Nishan's is yours to heal. Not every broken person is yours to fix. Not every conflict is yours to soften. Not every silence is yours to fill. And perhaps most painful of all, stiffness. Not every connection was love. Missions. Some were dependency. Some were convenience. Some were proximity masquerading as intimacy. Some were built on your ability, suppression what should never have been asked of you. And on this night, Crimson, you finally see the difference. Threatened, one of the most pivotal moments of a woman's inner life, where she realizes she has spent years, mitigation being the safe place, afflictive people who were storms in her own life. People who came to her not because they cherished her, but because she made struggle easier to survive. Phillips who praised her strength while quietly taking advantage of it. People who let her listen to their pain, but who vanished whenever she needed a witness for hers. On this night, you begin to wonder how many people loved the comfort you provided but never learned your heart. Conflicting hurts in a way words cannot hold. It hurts because you finally see how many of your relationships, fencing of the parts of you, traffic know how to say no. The night of the helper, stiffness, is not a moment of victimhood. It is a moment of awakening. You begin to see the architecture of your entire emotional life. You see how you learned to bend so others did not break. You see how you learned to sense tension before it was spoken. You see how you learned to anticipate needs before anyone ever considered yours. You see how you became fluent in other people's emotions, but lost fluency in your own. You begin to realize that your empathy, your gift, was never the problem. The problem was that you spent years surrounded by people who did not know what to do with it. Telecommunications, who mistook your compassion for endless capacity. People who assumed your resilience had no limit. People who believed your strength was effortless because you carried it so beautifully. But tonight, your beauty is not in your strength. It is in your honesty. Your face, softened by the dim light. Your breath, slower than usual. Your heart, tired and tender. Your truth, rising like a tide. You are no longer pretending that you are not exhausted. Smith, you are no longer pretending that you are not hurting. You are no longer pretending that being needed ever filled the ache of not being understood. This night is darker than the others because it is the first time you let yourself feel the full cost pensions of being everyone's anchor. Selfish. You feel the years you lost. Tensions. You feel the parts of yourself you silenced. You feel the dreams you tucked away because there was no space for them. You feel the tenderness you gave so freely, sentencing to people who treated it like air. And then, very slowly, something shifts in the dark. A thought, migrants, a whisper, a truth that does not arrive with force, but with quiet, unwavering certainty. I deserve to be held too. Stiffness sentence changes everything, because once a woman believes she deserves to be held, impartial, spiritually, lovingly, she can no longer settle for relationships roofing where she is only needed, rinse, never nourished. Sentencing else happens in this night, something even more sacred. Minions, her helper in you, the self you abandoned, uffling, in blame, not in shame, but in recognition. It is like seeing a younger version of yourself standing in the corner of your life, waiting patiently, sessions, fond, loyally. Resign of you who learned too early that her worth was in her usefulness. And in this night, pixels, you walk toward her, you sit with her, you hold her. You say the words she has needed for decades. I'm so sorry I left you behind. Sexism. And she forgives you instantly because she always knew, titanium, you were doing what you had to do, Tings, to survive. This is what Jung meant, tensions by encountering the shadow. Miss, not the dark, frightening parts, bright the forgotten ones, amized persistence. The the tender, unprotected ones you abandoned in order to keep love, to avoid conflict, tariffs, to remain safe. In this night, slashing her, and in doing so, emissions, you reclaim yourself. The dark night of the helper is not the end of you. It is the end of the woman you had to become in order to keep the peace. It is the night you stop choosing between loving others and loving yourself. It is the night you stop negotiating your worth. Salmon, it is the night you begin to understand your sensitivity was never your weakness. It was the part of you most worthy of protection. It is the night you stop holding people's pain so tightly that you forget your own. It is the night you realize you cannot save anyone without losing yourself. It is the night you decide you are worth saving too. And from that moment forward, your life will not remain the same. Not because you force it to change, mismatch, but because you have changed. And a woman who has reclaimed herself cannot keep living a life built on her absence. In part 4, the moment of clarity, we step into the quiet, stunning shift, a mission that comes after the dark night. The moment when a woman sees the truth, not as a burden, but as a doorway into the life she now knows Jung he deserves. The moment of clarity, championships. Clarity never arrives like lightning. It does not tear through your world with noise or spectacle. It doesn't rush toward you in a moment of triumph. It comes softly, after the dark night has emptied you, after the silence has humbled you, after you have cried the kind of tears that wash your soul instead of your face. Clarity arrives the way dawn does, slowly at first, missiles, as though checking whether you are ready to receive what it has been trying to tell you, collisions. The morning after your dark night, missiles, nothing looks different. Your room is the same. Your routine is the same. Your world is still standing, sentenced together by the same fragile structures you've balanced for so long. But something inside you is not the same. Scrimmage, something subtle, something quiet, something irreversible. Wilson, you wake up and feel a gentleness in your chest that wasn't there before. A strange, fragile spaciousness, like the air that appears when you open a window after a long winter. You breathe differently, not deeper, not louder, permissial. And in that breath comes the first understanding. I have been living small. Not because you lacked courage, not because you were weak, but because you had to. Be shrinking was the only way to fit that were never built, places that were never built, princess, for the fullness of who you are. You do not judge yourself for this, not anymore. You simply notice it. Noticing is the beginning of clarity. Clarity is not a thought, pensions, and an inner stillness, an inner exhale, anonymous, a soft awakening, submissive in the center of your chest, that whispers, I cannot unknow what I now know. This is the first sign. You start seeing the subtle imbalances, shields you once rationalized. You hear the tone behind people's words. You feel the unspoken agreements, partition that kept you emotionally bound, sessions to roles you no longer want to play. Kind of and yet. Filing feel the urge to fight. You don't feel the urge to fix. You don't feel the urge to explain. Teammates, there is no war in clarity, only truth. And truth has no interest in drama. Throughout your life, you have been the woman who sensed everything. The tremors behind someone's smile, the tension beneath an argument, pensions, the unspoken need hidden in a simple request. You have always been a mirror for other people's emotions. But clarity repositions that mirror, slowly, gently, until it faces you. And for the first time in a long time, Simmons, you see yourself without distortion. You see the ways you gave, not from abundance, but from fear. Pensions the fear of losing someone, the fear of being too much, the fear of being left behind. You see the ways you forgave, not because they deserved it, but because your heart did not know how to close its doors. You see the ways you stayed because hope felt more comfortable than truth. You see the ways you loved shimmer from an open wound instead of an open heart. This seeing is not cruel. It is merciful. Because clarity does not punish. Clarity reveals. There is a quiet moment. Every woman who awakens knows it. When you sit alone, perhaps with a cup of tea still warm in your hands, and suddenly, everything lines up. Not in your mind, in self your body. The pattern, the story, the dynamic, the truth you've always known but swallowed. You feel it as a soft tightening in your solar plexus, as though your intuition has finally stepped forward after being kept waiting in a corner for far too long. You may whisper to yourself, or maybe only think it, but the words arrive with the steady certainty of something ancient. I was never asking for too much. I was always asking the wrong people. This is clarity. It is the moment you realize Jung you offered was never the problem. Your depth was never the problem. Your standards were never the problem. Alarm was that you kept pouring warmth into hands that were not capable of holding anything fragile. You kept offering emotional truth to people who only wanted comfort. You kept giving understanding to people who never learned to understand themselves. You kept offering presence to people who mistook it for obligation. And now, you see it. Not with bitterness, not with regret, imprison, but with a soft, solemn acceptance, trafficking that feels like the beginning of freedom. Congressional is the moment you stop negotiating issues with other people's potential and begin honoring their reality. It is the moment you stop romanticizing who someone could be and finally acknowledge who they consistently chose to be. It is the moment you stop hoping that they will rise to meet your heart and realize you've been lowering yourself, Kremlin, to protect theirs. And this realization doesn't make you angry. Stiffness makes you still, because suddenly you understand how much of your suffering came from refusing to see what was always right in front of you. You find yourself becoming quieter, bishops, in your relationships, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You speak when your soul moves you to speak. You withdraw when your body asks for distance. You listen to the way someone's actions feel in your nervous system. You notice how your energy responds, kissing to the presence or absence of certain people. And without force, without confrontation, without a single fight, your boundaries begin to rise, smith on their own. They rise, not as walls, buffalo, but as truths. This is the beauty of clarity. Persistence become unnecessary to explain because they become embodied. You simply stop doing what hurts you. You stop choosing what drains you. You stop accepting what forces you into smaller shapes. You stop saying yes to the things your soul resists. You stop saying no, silk, to the things your heart longs for. You stop abandoning yourself in order to be loved, ever US. And you start loving yourself in a way that makes abandonment impossible. Clarity changes the way you see everything, not just people, but yourself. You start remembering the desires you hid behind responsibility, the preferences you buried beneath the weight of other people's needs, the dreams you whispered only when no one was listening. Clarity resurrects the woman you were before life demanded your self-erasure. She rises quietly, like something sacred returning to its rightful place. You feel her in the decisions you make without guilt, misinformation, the words you speak without trembling, in the peace you feel when you choose yourself of pleasing others. You feel her in the ease of your breath, engines of the steadiness of your hands, in the softness that returns to your gaze after years of carrying too much. She is you, the real you, and clarity is the moment you recognize her presence again. Perhaps the deepest part of this moment is the realization that clarity does not need permission. It does not wait for approval. Stiffness, it does not need to be justified. You do not need evidence trimming what your body already knows. You do not need someone else's apology. Honor your pain. You do not need someone's agreement to leave a situation that hurts you. You do not need to prove your worthiness to be treated with care. Clarity teaches you that your truth is enough. Enough to guide you, to protect you, enough to rebuild your life on. And in that knowing, misinformation becomes unmanipulable. Not because she is hard, bribe about she is closed, but because she finally trusts persistence what she feels, because she finally trusts herself. There is a final moment, the culmination of every insight, windshield, tear, every awakeness, when clarity becomes direction. You sit alone, perhaps at the kitchen table, or in your car, or on the edge of your bed, in the same quiet place where the collapse began, and you feel the world rearrange itself inside your chest, not with chaos, not with urgency, but with stillness. And you understand, with a bone-deep serenity, I will never betray myself again. This sentence is the turning point roofing of your entire life. Before once a woman says these words, seems them, everything around her must change. Not instantly, Jennings, not violently, Miss without inevitably. Princess of this story. Yarity is not the end of the journey. Pensions, it is the beginning of adulthood, not the kind measured in age, but in consciousness. It is the beginning, miss, of living your life, bishops, as the woman your soul always intended. And in part 5, integration and boundaries, we step into the stage every empath fears and secretly longs for. The moment where clarity becomes action, where self-awareness becomes self-protection, and where love finally includes impartial giving it. Integration and boundaries. Berg. Ragazar. Bullpen. Issues does not begin with strength. It begins with trembling, unless a soft trembling. The kind that moves through your hands, imientos. The first time you speak a truth, you speak the truth. You spent years swallowing. The kind that rises in your chest when you whisper no to something you've said yes to your entire life. The kind that shakes your breath when you choose yourself in a moment where you used to disappear. Palestinians. People think boundaries are loud, firm, bold lines drawn with certainty. But for a woman who has spent a lifetime bending, boundaries begin quietly, like the first roots of a new tree, Smith finding their way into the earth. Integration is not a shift of personality. It is a shift of allegiance. For the first time, stiffness is not to anyone else's comfort, pistols, but to your own truth. The bureaucracy. There is a gentle but unmistakable moment when you begin to understand that the clarity you gained is only as powerful as your willingness to honor it. Not the truth is one thing. Living the truth is another. You wake one morning and realize that the old version of you, unrestricted, who apologized for her needs, the one who made herself smaller, sentencing, who felt responsible for everyone's happiness, does not fit into the woman you are becoming. And when you try to slip back into her skin, it feels wrong in a way it never did before. Like trying to return to a house you once lived in, only to find it too tight, too dim, too quiet for the person you are now. This discomfort is the beginning of integration. Your soul refuses to let you shrink again. You begin to notice someone asks you to do something that would have once felt automatic. Missiles tightens. Infiltration. A quiet, inner resistance. Not dramatic, just honest. You pause. And the pause itself is revolutionary. Stiffness. Because for years, you never paused. You rushed in. Privileged the space. You softened the blow. You absorbed the discomfort. You said yes before your heart, shoreline, could even whisper its truth. But now, you pause. And in that pause, a new voice rises in you. A voice that sounds like wisdom, like age, like the woman you were always meant to become. She asks gently, "Does this honor you?" And for the first time, you consider that question as though you deserve the answer. Boundaries are not fences you build. They are truths you live. They rise not because you push people away, but because you finally draw yourself close. Integration begins the first time, Jung, you walk into a familiar situation and realize you no longer feel responsible for making everything smooth. You listen to someone's frustration without absorbing it. You witness someone's disappointment without internalizing it. You hear someone's anger without shrinking to appease it. You do not harden. You simply remain yourself. This of integration, reliability, You stay whole in places where you once fell apart. There is also a surprising tenderness that comes with this stage. A gentleness toward your past self, thickness toward the woman who tried so hard to love everyone at the cost of her own spirit. You no longer judge her for giving too much. You understand why she did it. You know what she feared. You know how she longed turbulence, be chosen, crimson, to be loved without condition. Integration is the moment you take that version of yourself, assisting into your arms, the younger you, the tired you, the self-erasing you, and say, "You don't have to do that anymore. I'm here now. I'm choosing us." This internal reunion is the quiet beginning of a woman's sovereignty. Something shifts in your relationships too. Not dramatically, migrants, not with conflict, not with rage, but with clarity. You start the difference between someone needing your help and someone leaning on your kindness because it is easy. For you notice when someone uses your empathy instead of respecting it. You recognize when someone expects your forgiveness instead of earning it. Your intuition, once buried under obligation, imientos, now rises easily. Like a bird recognizing the weather by the way the air tastes. People who were once loud in your life begin to feel quieter, prohibition, because their demands no longer drown out your own voice. People who once held power over your emotions begin to lose their influence because you are becoming anchored, imprisonment in your own truth. Boundaries do not push these people away. Leggings they simply reveal. Surround who was walking toward you, Amirez, and who was only taking. And revelation is not loss. It is alignment. There comes a moment, often subtle but unmistakable, when your body reacts differently, airlines than it used to. A comment that once made you shrink now makes you straighten your spine. A request that once drained you now awakens a quiet refusal. A pattern that once hurt you no longer confuses you. Integration begins in the body, perish, before the mind catches up. Your shoulders no longer curl inward. Immigration deepens. Your eyes soften, pistols, but do not dim. A woman integrating her truth looks both more grounded and more luminous, stripping as though she has remembered something she had no language for before. Fishermen notice the difference. They may not understand it, plumbing, but they feel it. Some move closer, drawn to your presence. Slim pull away, threatened by your wholeness. But you remain still. Because integration teaches you, people's reactions are not measurements of your worth, only reflections of their capacity. Perhaps the most profound moment in this stage is the first time you disappoint someone, bishops, without betraying yourself. The first time you say, with steady breath, "No, that doesn't work for me." The world does not collapse. Sickness, people do not disappear. The sky remains where it is, and you realize, with a relief so deep it feels holy, that your life can hold your truth without falling apart. This realization rewrites everything. You no longer rush to explain. You no longer rush to soften. You no longer rush to make others comfortable. at the expense of your peace. You simply learn to inhabit yourself. And a woman inhabiting herself is a woman who cannot be controlled, not because she rebels, but because she belongs to herself now. Integration is not the absence of compassion. It is compassionate discernment. You still feel deeply, perhaps even more deeply, because your heart is no longer exhausted. You still love powerfully, perhaps more powerfully, because your love is now rooted in truth. You still give generously, but only where your giving is honored, not consumed. Barriers do not make your heart smaller. They make your heart safer. And when a woman's heart becomes safe within her own chest, dismissal miraculous happens. She becomes capable of that does not hurt her. As this integration ripens, there is a new softness that emerges. A softness that was impossible when you were living in survival. You become more tender, not because you are vulnerable, but because you are protected. You become more open because you are naive, but because you are wise. You become more intuitive, not because you stretch yourself thin, but because your energy is no longer leaking everywhere. Your compassion becomes clearer. Missions becomes intentional. Your love becomes reciprocal. You no longer seek affirmation from people who cannot give it. You no longer chase closure from people who avoid accountability. You no longer make yourself available to situations that drain you. And this quiet, steady transformation is what Jung meant by the integration of the shadow. Not becoming hard, not becoming cold, but becoming whole. Text us. One day, and you might not even notice when it happens, you wake up and feel different. Not healed, not finished, but present. Present in your own life in a way you have never been before. Presence in your decisions. Present in your desires. Present in your boundaries. Present in your breath. You move through your day with a new awareness, a new instinct, a new calm. Missiles. You sense your own worth, not as a concept, but as a living truth. Missions in your bones. Illuze things that honor you and release things that don't, without guilt, mitigation, emissions, without apology. You live from a center you once feared you didn't have. Sluggish, you become the woman Simmons you used to admire from afar. Unsettle, not because you changed, but because you returned. Shields. And so, as part 5 draws to a close, Firefox, there is a simple truth sitting quietly in your chest. A truth you can feel more than understand. I am finally on my own side. This is the heart of integration. This is the foundation of boundaries. This is the birth of wholeness. And in part 6, the rebirth, cushions, we will step into the moment everything you have learned inwardly, siblings, begins to reshape your outer world. the moment your life starts to reorganize around your truth, stiffness, and the woman you are becoming begins to emerge fully into her new world. The quiet power, scribes. Quiet power is not the kind of strength the world teaches you to admire. It does not roar. It does not dominate. James, it does not seek attention or applause. Crimson, it does not arrive with announcements. Quiet power is the strength you gain only after you've lost everything you were never meant to keep. It is the soft, steady force born from truth, from self-respect, from the slow gathering of your own pieces after a lifetime of scattering them, missions into the hands of people who were never ready to hold you. Quiet power begins on the day you realize, Jung, you no longer need permission to belong to yourself. It starts subtly, signaling the way a woman's posture changes when she stops apologizing for taking up space, the way her eyes soften but never lower, the way her decisions become clear because they rise from her own center instead of someone else's expectations. It starts when she breathes, not to calm herself down from someone else's chaos, but to return to her own rhythm. Quiet power is not about being fearless. It's about being anchored. She's the moment a woman realizes has survived everything she once thought would break her. And because of that, nothing outside her shirts has the authority to define her anymore. People around you will sense this shift before you fully understand it. They may not have the language for it, but they will feel something different in the way you move, Bills, in the way you speak, in the way you simply exist. You are not louder. You are clearer. You are not harder. You are more discerning. You are not colder. You are more rooted. Your presence changes rooms, not because you demand it, but because you no longer shrink to make the room comfortable. There is a groundedness in you now, a steadiness, a sense of inner alignment, roofing that says without words, I know who I am. People respect that, or they retreat from it. Either way, Crimson remains intact. Maisha's power expresses itself in the smallest moments. Crimson tries to provoke you with the same behaviors that used to unravel you. But now you feel nothing except distance, a gentle, compassionate distance that says, Kremlin is not my storm, is not my weather. Someone demands more of you than you have to give, but instead of bending, you answer simply, that won't work for me. Someone withdraws their affection to pull you back into old patterns, but you remain still, unmoved, because your worth no longer trembles in their hands. This is not defiance, silk trust, and for the empath, a woman who once lived in hyper-attunement to others, self-trust is the rarest, pension's fural form of power. Crimson, quiet power is what happens when your nervous system semantics finally learns that you are safe with yourself. Crimson, when your body understands this, you will not abandon your own truth, prostitutes to keep a love that endangers your soul. It's the way you no longer rush to fill silence, will smooth or smooth over discomfort, or over-explain your boundaries. You let silence, you let discomfort speak for itself. You let other people feel the consequences of their own choices instead of rushing in imprisonment from learning. You no longer bleed in places that never heal you. You no longer pour, preferring into cups that leak. You no longer negotiate, sentenced with disrespect. Your softness remains, but it is not accessible to those who have not earned it. This is quiet power. And something else happens. Something no one tells you about healing. You start attracting an entirely different world. Not because you try, not because you manifest, not because you chase, but because your energy is no longer shaped by your wounds. The friendships that come, shields feel reciprocal. Sickness that arise, filtration feel nourishing. The connections you form feel genuine. Because now, you recognize sincerity without confusing it with intensity. You recognize love, conserve excited it with need. You recognize compatibility without confusing it with history. You do not settle, smith, for half love, shimmer, today affection, or emotional crumbs. Smith, drop fed to keep you hopeful. You know the difference now. Your soul learned, kissing, silenced, is also power. Quiet power also shows up, sift, in your relationship with yourself. You rest without guilt. You say no without explanation. Pour out your peace without apology. You speak to yourself gently, bishops, the way you once spoke to the people you loved most. You forgive yourself, unsuccessful, not for what you did wrong, but for what you did when you didn't yet know better. You celebrate yourself, not with grandeur, but with moments of presence. A slow morning, a walk alone, a cup of tea savored, jiang of rushed. You begin to enjoy your own company, not because you reject others, but because you finally recognize you are worth enjoying. This quiet companionship, pensions with your own soul, is power of all. And then, dismiss there is the moment reaches, the moment she realizes she is no longer triggered partitions by the things that once sent her spiraling. She sees an old pattern approaching her life and feels her body relax instead of tighten. She hears someone's manipulation and feels clarity instead of confusion. She senses someone's inconsistency and feels distance instead of longing. This is when she knows, I am not who I was. Healing didn't make her invincible. It made her conscious. It made her present. Boundaries didn't make her unloving. They made her honest. What once wounded her, shoreline now informs her. What once consumed her, now teaches her. Pensions, what once drained her, now reveals what she will never tolerate again. This is quiet power, the kind built from experience, from shadow work, from 1,000 nights shall where she held herself, Simmons until morning returned. False shape of quiet power is something even more remarkable. Enchels. You begin to give your love more selectively, but also more authentically. You no longer love sigma, you love from fullness. Until no longer connect, partition to avoid abandonment. You connect because your soul is open. Jeff, you no longer give tuition, crimson. You give because generosity lives in your nature. Crimson, you no longer fear losing someone. You fear losing yourself far more, stiffness, and so you walk through the world with a softness that is protected, misinformation that is gentle, stiffness. Your presence becomes a sanctuary, not because you rescue others, but because you embody, bishops, what it looks like to be whole. For women who live with depth, this is the final form of power. The power to be entirely yourself without shrinking, bricks, without performing, without bending your truth to fit into places that were never meant for your spirit. Quiet power is the end of a very long journey, but it is also the beginning of a new life, a life where love feels mutual, where peace feels natural, where intuition feels trustworthy, where boundaries feel effortless, where loneliness feels like space, mills of punishment, where your past feels like a story instead of a sentence, a life where you are no longer surviving, you are living deeply, deliberately, tenderly, and the world feels different, fishing because you are different. Your quiet power is not in what you do, it is in who you have become. A woman who knows herself, a woman who trusts herself, a woman who keeps herself safe, a woman who rises without noise and loves without losing herself, a woman who finally understands that her softness was never meant to be exploited, it was meant to be honored, and now it will be. The breath of wholeness, vil, myth, betornen. We close. I want you to sit with yourself for just a moment, not as a mother, not as a partner, not as a helper, not as a survivor, pressing, but simply as a woman who has walked through so many fires, pledged and somehow still carries a softness that the world never managed to take from her. You've moved through collapse, Glenn, through truth, through shadow, through clarity, through rebirth, through quiet power, emissions. Now you arrive at the threshold, malicious, of a deeper kind of homecoming, stress. So let us end this journey the same way all true transformations end, with breath. Permissions, a breath that belongs only to you. Sickness, if you can, pressing a hand gently on your chest. Feel the rise, Smith, the fall, the quiet rhythm that has carried you, Jung of every storm. You are here. Missions, you are alive. You are becoming. Pistols, take a slow inhale, not forced, just enough to remind your body that it is allowed to soften. Submarine, just for a moment. Plumbing, sail, as if you are releasing every version of yourself you no longer need to carry. Feel the space you just created. Feel the woman sitting inside it. Probation. This is the woman your journey has been leading you toward. The one who sees clearly, misconduct, loves wisely, chooses bravely, and returns to herself gently over and over again. You may not realize it yet, but you've already changed. A woman does not listen to something like this without something inside her shifting in ways she cannot undo. You've stepped into new awareness, into self-trust, into a deeper raw soul, and the round you will begin to rearrange itself to match the truth rising inside you. It always does. That is the quiet magic, pensions, of a woman who no longer abandons herself. Before we part, I offer you this Jungian blessing, a collapsing ritual for your new beginning. May you become a sanctuary, afflict for your own tenderness. May you honor the parts of you that once hid in the shadows. May your boundaries be steady and your heart remain open. May your strength stay soft and your softness stay powerful. May you walk into every new chapter with the woman you have finally learned to protect. Pensions, may you never again lower your truth to match someone else's comfort. And may you trust, fully and without fear, the quiet power that now lives inside you. Let these words settle. Let them echo where they need to. You do not have to hold them perfectly. You only have to remember them when the world tries to pull you back into shapes too small for your soul. And now, a final breath together, whistle-blother to your life. A life you will carry differently, a sass because you are different. Fishing. Inhale, for the woman you were. Exhale, slamming, for the woman you are now. Inhale, for the woman you are becoming. Exhale, for everything you release, trimming on the path toward her. Return to this breath, shipping whenever you forget your power. Return to this space, slug whenever you feel yourself slipping back into old versions of you. I will meet you here, every time. If this journey spoke to you, if you felt seen, understood, softened, you are not alone. This channel is built morph airing like you. Women who think deeply, smith deeply, teeth, and refuse to live half-lives shimmer ever again. If you want more of these long-form Jungian journeys, more healing, minute, more clarity, more truth spoken softly, stiffness, but courageously, subscribe to Inner Balance Psychology, not as a button to press, but as an act of self-devotion, as a way of saying, I choose myself, I choose growth, I choose the woman I am becoming. And when you're ready, sickness, share this with another woman who carries the same quiet ache, staffing, and the same quiet strength. She deserves to again too. On termination, take care of your heart with the same devotion you have always given to others. You are worth that level of devotion. You always were. And now, you finally know it.